What's going on, guys? This is Rob, and we need to make this a regular series. So, the Marvel Cinematic Universe needs Galactus. It's not one of those the MCU wants Galactus or the MCU should have Galactus. The MCU needs Galactus. And here's the reason why. So let's talk about his origin for a second, right? Galactus's origin is actually really intriguing, and it actually comes in two parts. So in the old Thor stories from back in the day, the explanation that we got in terms of Galactus's origin is that he was just a space explorer, and his universe was coming to an end, and he didn't know why. And he was the last surviving thing in his universe, and so the sentience of that universe merged with him, and then he was reborn into the new universe as Galactus. And that's it. That's all we really got. Now, years later, Marvel gave us a story called Adventures of the X-Men, really a comic line called Adventures of the X-Men. But what this did is it actually said the death of Galen's universe was just part of a much bigger picture that Galen didn't know about. That the reality of what was going on is that the sixth iteration of the multiverse was basically dying, that the Dweller in Darkness had fractured the M'Kraan crystal, and in doing so, the M'Kraan crystal basically became a black hole, sucking in the multiverse, and that what the Dweller in Darkness wanted to do was to absorb the energy of the multiverse and then make himself God. Ultimately, he was defeated, but by the time he was defeated, the end of the multiverse could not be stopped. And so when Galen's universe died, it was actually the multiverse dying. And that's why when Galen was reborn as Galactus, there was actually a version of Galactus in every single universe across the multiverse. Now, more recently in the Doctor Strange Defenders story, I guess Galactus' origin is kind of being rewritten. I don't really know. We don't know if it's going to stick or not. But as far as the actual origin that's tried and true, that's the one that you get. But having him in the MCU would be hugely intriguing, because let's do what we said we would do in these videos back when we first started doing them, and let's focus on our kind of like, I guess maybe tried and true villain in the MCU up to this point, which is Thanos, right? He's kind of the gold standard, right? Thanos basically blinked out half the life in the universe because his world died out because there were too many people and not enough resources, and he believed that's what would happen across the whole universe, so he basically just blinked out half the life in the universe. I mean, you guys have all seen the memes though, right? Like, why didn't you just double all the resources in the universe, Thanos? Or why didn't you do what the Council of Reeds did, which was take entire worlds that were basically barren, use your Infinity Gauntlet and turn them into life-supporting worlds so you can literally just grow resources on those worlds and take them to places where resources are scarce. Even then, in 1,000 years, everything is going to be right back to where it was before. So literally Thanos made no progress whatsoever, but the plot demanded the story, so that's the story we got. But Thanos is two-dimensional. He's basic, he's not very interesting. He's done some cool stuff, and seeing some of the things he did was cool, but when you break it down beyond like the eye candy, like the glitz and glamour, and you look at Thanos as an actual villain in the MCU, he's not interesting. Not really in the slightest. Galactus defies that standard. So here's an important thing to understand about his character. Galactus doesn't like doing what he does. Galactus hates the idea of traveling around the cosmos and consuming life-sustaining worlds. He despises it, right? Like literally, it's what he said over and over and over again. He views his existence as a curse. And there's a lot of storylines out there that actually solidify this. The original Secret Wars in 1984, when the Beyonder first appeared. I don't know if you guys read that story, but quite literally, it was a booming voice from the sky, right? All the heroes and all the villains had basically been taken and they'd all been thrown on two different ships. The villains went on one ship and the heroes went on the other. And the Beyonder was just like, all of you guys basically fight to the death, and whoever wins, I will grant your wildest dream. And the response of Galactus was, you can cure me of my hunger, which of course, the Beyonder batted Galactus away like he was nothing, and he's like, no, you get down there and you fight. And then I will give you your wish if you win. But it's one of those cool little moments because Galactus consistently just reiterates the fact that he hates his existence. For him, it's a curse, but he's also a necessity. Now, there's two reasons why Galactus is a necessity. The first is the one that was originally given to us, which was he just is. And the second one is an actual explanation. So the first one that was given to us is an old story called the Trial of Reed Richards. That Reed Richards was basically put on trial by the various empires of the universe, right? The Shi'ar, the Kree, the Skrull, the Badoon, the whole 9 yards, because he had saved the life of Galactus. And in doing so, he had essentially doomed countless people across countless civilizations until the end of the universe to their deaths, because Galactus would show up to their worlds, consume them, and pretty much kill all those people in the process. And so during this trial, the cosmic entity Eternity appeared to everybody, granting every single person cosmic awareness, right? Everybody at that trial granted them cosmic awareness so they were able to understand the tapestry, right? The kind of cosmic hierarchy. And what he established is Galactus has to exist, right? He serves a purpose in the universe. That getting mad at Galactus consuming a life-sustaining world is like being mad at a supernova exploding and then basically wiping everything out, right? Like wiping out an entire star system. That's what it's like. It's just the natural order of things. But in reality, the answer we got is because it just is just that way, and like that was it. Now, fast forward to a couple stories. The first one is called Earth X, and the second one is S.H.I.E.L.D. by Jonathan Hickman. Earth X is actually what the Eternals film is based off of, and we talked about that in previous videos. But it's basically the Eternals film in terms of the Celestials, right? Depositing their essences, right? Basically banging planets and like depositing their essence into that planet. And then eventually that celestial egg will grow to become a full celestial. It'll emerge and destroy the planet in the process. The role Galactus played in the Earth X series is that he would consume worlds that celestials could use to deposit their eggs in. In effect, he was keeping the celestial population in check. Now, for years and years and years, this was a one-off. It was isolated, it was by itself, it was not the standard. In more recent years, with Jonathan Hickman's S.H.I.E.L.D., it became the standard. So that's basically what Galactus does now. He travels around the cosmos. But here's where Galactus would really benefit in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and it's probably one of the most important things. Galactus, despite him being a guy that consumes life-sustaining worlds and can create life and destroy life and is almost omnipotent in terms of the power he has, that he's actually as much a supporting character for other characters in comics as he is this godly being. So there's a couple really good examples of this. The first one is Reed Richards himself, along with Franklin Richards, and the second one is the Ultimate. So like Black Panther, Adam Brashear, Monica Rambeau, America Chavez, Carol Danvers, right? Those characters, right? The Ultimate Avengers, the multiversal Avengers, essentially. So looking at like Reed and Franklin, there's a couple different things to understand about this. The first is that Galactus has been around the block more than a few times. Reed Richards is the smartest person in the universe, and so Galactus has a lot of respect for Reed, that 9 times out of 10, if anybody runs up on Galactus and tries to talk to him, he'll just ignore him. He'll treat them like they're not there, because the reality here is, let's take an average person on Earth, right? Our lives are anywhere between 80 to 90 years. It's like that for Galactus, right? It's the blink of an eye, fraction of a second, right? Just an infinitesimal small amount of time for a guy who's lived for billions of years and will live for billions more, right? So the fact that like Reed is even fascinating to him is one of those things that's just kind of crazy, and it really is a testament to how important Reed is in the grand scheme of Marvel Comics. Franklin is even more interesting because when Franklin Richards was really, really young, he had the ability to alter reality, and he still does, right? He's a universal constant. He can alter reality on a cosmic scale. And in fact, at the end of all things, when the universe dies, Franklin and Galactus will actually merge into a singular being and be reborn as a new composite being, right? But the important thing here is that there came a point that because Franklin couldn't necessarily control his powers, Reed put mental blocks in place. There came a point during Jonathan Hickman's Fantastic Four where those blocks were removed by Franklin's adult self, and then younger Franklin was basically tapping into his powers. There comes a point in the story where Galactus snatches up Reed and was like, we need to go have a conversation. And Reed's like, okay, what's going on? And Galactus, terrified when he says it, he's like, your son's powers have come back. Franklin has his powers again. He can alter reality on a cosmic scale again, right? A 12-year-old kid who can basically make anything reality. It's a terrifying prospect, but it's one of those things where despite how powerful Galactus is, putting him next to someone basically amps up the significance of that person. You kind of have to build on the idea that Galactus just doesn't really care, but if it's one of those things where like you have Reed Richards, right? John Krasinski's Reed Richards in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, he's a guy who does his thing, right? He's just kind of like a scientist, you know, and you may look at him as like a poor man's Tony Stark or something like that. Galactus shows up and it's like, Reed, we have to talk. And it's like, damn. It's like the President of the United States busting into your classroom, addressing you by your first name and saying, you and I need to have a conversation, right? People are just gonna be like, damn, who is that guy, right? Like, that's how people are gonna react. The other part of this is Al Ewing's Ultimates, right? The Ultimate Avengers were a really, really, really cool team. The first story arc they got was actually fixing Galactus, that when they analyzed and they realized that he was basically an incomplete evolution, that he was supposed to continue on, but for whatever reason he didn't. So they basically finished his evolution for him and turned him into the Lifebringer. But what you're talking about here, Black Panther, like, right, Adam Brashear is probably smarter than Black Panther, but like these guys are ridiculously powerful and incredibly capable, and they were were able to fix a cosmic entity. That's a big thing. So having Galactus in the MCU would certainly amplify characters in a way that simply can't be done. Because to be honest with you guys, there's only so many stories that you can tell where like Galactus shows up on Earth and then like wants to consume it. The Fantastic Four and the Earth superheroes fight him off. The Silver Surfer stays behind because he betrayed Galactus and now he's trapped here. You know, it's just one of those, you can only tell that story so many times before people are just kind of like, I mean, look, I'm tired of seeing Galactus, you know, fight these guys. Instead, what Galactus needs to be in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and this is the most important thing that I think really needs to be reiterated here, Galactus needs to be a guy who shows up for a film arc, right? He shows up, right? It's basically the Marvel Cinematic Universe version of the original Galactus trilogy in Marvel Comics, right? The old Stan Lee, Jack Kirby story where Galactus shows up to Earth with the intention of consuming it. The Silver Surfer warns the Fantastic Four ahead of time. The Fantastic Four work with Silver Surfer. His heart changes, and then he helps them fight off Galactus, and then Galactus traps him on Earth as punishment for his betrayal, right? You do that. Yeah, it doesn't have to be exactly like that, but like you do the Galactus trilogy. Following that, Galactus only ever appears every once in a while. And when he shows up, it's a big thing. Because what you don't want to do is overuse him. You don't want to have one of these things where it's like, man, Galactus is showing up all the time. You know, it's crazy. That's what Marvel did with the Watcher. In Marvel Comics, they did that with the Watcher. Every time the Watcher showed up, it was a big deal. And then after a while, it's just like, okay, so he's just kind of here hanging out watching stuff. Maybe it's a big deal, maybe it's not, right? But he's in the Peanuts gallery. That's all it was, right? It didn't matter that the Watcher was there anymore. And so you don't want to abuse the nature of Galactus in the MCU. You want to have it as one of these things where he's always kind of this lingering threat that's out there. But after the threat is dealt with here on Earth, and you basically walk away from the movie with this idea of, okay, so Galactus isn't really going to be a credible threat to Earth anymore. Now it becomes one of those things where he bolsters characters, right? They need the help of Galactus. There's some massive threat out there. They need the aid of Galactus. More so than that, you can actually amplify the power of villains by having them defeat Galactus. Now again, you can't abuse this, right? You can't have like any swinging with the Infinity Gauntlet, just like, yeah, man, I beat Galactus, it was amazing. You know, it's like, well, so did like 15 other people, right? Who cares? It can't be one of those things, right? Galactus has to be handled very, very delicately. He has to be handled in a way to where you're able to produce him to the audience as just this clear and present danger by some mystical means, probably the use of the ultimate nullifier. They're able to defeat Galactus and basically run him off. And then he's always kind of this lingering threat out there, right? Like a shark that's just off the coast. And if you swim out just 10 more feet, you're gonna get eaten, right? Just that kind of thing, right? A guy who's just sort of out there, but he can help as much as he can hurt. But the presence of his arrival, right? Seeing him show up means it's a big deal. Something huge is about to happen, right? Like that's what Galactus has to represent. Otherwise, he becomes exactly what he is right now in Marvel Comics, a guy who's just kind of a punching bag. So with that being said, guys, let me know what you think about having Galactus in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Do you want to see it? Are you excited about the idea of it? Let me know how you guys feel. Thank you all for watching, and I will catch you all later. Peace.